Hello and welcome to GDW Tutorial 2, Introduction to Prefabs and Materials. In this video, we will be covering how to create basic prefabs, how to use those prefabs, how to edit them, as well as how to create materials to cover our objects in the scene. Throughout this tutorial, we will be creating a mock-up of a board game board using just 2D primitives that we learned about last week. As for hand-ins this week, that will be covered in the recap section of this video. So if you're looking for that, you can just skip there now. Till then, let's get started. All right, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is open up the drive link that's been linked to you. This includes a Unity package that we're going to download. Right-click, download. In the future, if your tutorials ever include any assets, there will be a shareable link that links to a folder named after the numbered tutorial. And yeah. So we want to open this, but you'll notice it's a Unity package. Now this is a file type that is specific to Unity. So let's open up our project from last week. We're going to be continuing with this project, but not mocking up a game frame. Now, we want to create a board game. Since that's your first real full project in this course. So you'll notice we have everything from last week. But what we want to do is right-click, create, scene. We're going to just call it board game. Now we're going to double-click it. And now you can see we're in a new scene. If we double-click the other one, it'll be our old scene. If we go back to board game, you'll notice that the skybox is blue. So what we want to do is we want to go to Assets, right-click, Import Package, Custom Package, and you'll notice I have included two sprites. The first one is really more of an example. I wanted to give this so that you guys can see what we are going for. This is what we're aiming for. And you'll notice specifically that when we resize it, we can make it so that this grid lines up with the boxes. And that's what we want to do. However, the big issue with this is we can't move any of these snakes. We can't move any of these ladders. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to mock up our own version. Now, we're going to start with our base, which is just this board. We're going to make it big so that it fits. You'll notice once you make it fit, do 0, 0, you'll notice the grid lines line up almost perfectly. And yeah, so that is the base for our board game. And what you'll notice that I've just done over here, this is something we talked about last week. This is the inspector, and all I did was I pressed 0 and I pressed 0, just to make sure that it was in the exact center. Now, what do we need next? Well, let's bring our board up over here, outside of the camera, just so we can see it. Don't forget that you can right-click to drag around. Okay, so we've got ladders and snakes. Now, the snakes are going to be tricky. However, we can easily do the ladders. So for right now, we're going to right click on board. And when you right click on a specific object, it creates that object under it. So we want a square. Then we want to put it on layer 1. Create it over here. So we now have a square. But we want it to be a ladder. This is what's going to represent our ladder. So from 5 to 35, which is a green block, we have a ladder right here. And if we Control C, Control V, we have a ladder from 9 to 51, and that's our ladder here. Next up, Control C, Control V, we have a ladder from 91 all the way down to 69. And that's our ladder here. Control C, Control V. We have another ladder all the way from 44 up to 86. That's our ladder here. We have 2 more ladders. We've got a ladder from 23. And if you're wondering how I'm figuring out exactly where these go, you'll notice that the colors, the pattern of colors is the exact same. So I just look for this one in the 3rd column. Now you'll notice that we have one that goes from 23 to 42, and that's our ladder here. And for the last ladder, goes from 62 all the way to 83. And those are our ladders. It's already coming together. Now, we've got to add a circle. That's going to represent our goal. Add a circle, resize it, and that is our goal. And then we want the So what we're going to do here, you see we have an arrow here. Now how are we going to do that? Well, if we right click, create empty parent, we're going to call this arrow. By double clicking on it, you can change the name, or you can come over here, right click, 2D object, sprite, square. We're going to zero it out. We're also going to zero this one out. I'm going to make this smaller. And now, if we move this object, using this, we have an arrow. Now, so the issue is, this object isn't a sprite, so you can't use the rect tool. It doesn't have a rect. But you can go up here and switch to the move tool. And then from here, we can scale our object. So what we've just created here, we're going to put this at 1, 1, just to make sure that it's on top of the board. I'm going to make sure our Y is at 0, so it's in the very middle. what we've just created here is a compound object. So what we're going to do is we're going to create folder in assets. I'm going to call it prefabs. Let's say we ever want an arrow again. If we just take this object right here, click it, and drag into our prefabs folder, we now have a prefab. And if we go back, press the back button to exit. If you double click, back button to exit. So if we go here, you'll notice our arrow looks like this right now. You'll notice it's blue. So if we go in here, click it, use our rec tool to make this smaller, change Y to 0 again. You'll notice this looks different now. We come out, so does this. The reason for this is that this is a linked prefab. So whenever I edit this, if I start dragging a whole bunch of these into the scene, they're just on top of each other. And if I just start dragging a whole bunch of these onto the scene, and then I start reshaping things, that's what it looks like now. Press the back button, and all of these have now been reshaped. That's the power of prefabs. But let's say you have one in here that you don't want to change. Let's say, you want to change it back to being all proper looking. That's okay. So what we do from here, little. So now we have this. Now all of them have changed to this, but let's say we don't want one of them to change from this. So what we can do is right click, prefab, unpack. So this is no longer blue because it is no longer a linked prefab. This is just a regular object now. Whereas this one is. But if I go in here, do that, you'll notice all of these got switched, but the one that we unpacked did not. So that's a big feature with prefabs as well. Basically, you can force them to not follow what everything else is doing. And also, if you select like that, you can do that. However, it won't move your object with this. You should be using this if you're going to move it. But yeah, that is the basics of what a prefab is. So this right here, what we've just created here, is our arrow. This is our start arrow. And you don't need to type these numbers in, and I've mentioned it, but I'm going to reiterate it. You don't need to type these numbers in. There is a feature where if you hover over the Y or the X, you can quite simply just drag. And this goes for any of the different components. So the Z. Yeah. So now we've got our go. We might want to make it a little bit bigger so it matches. There we go. Now we've got our go. Now for the snakes, we're not going to be able to do just squiggly lines right now. The reason for that is because we don't have the tools. We don't have a sprite that's squiggly. We don't have the tools right now. But we will have the tools soon. So I'm going to start renaming these. So So this is go. This is goal. These are all ladder. And if we select, shift click, right click, create empty parent, we can just call this ladders. And then we can make it small. So now we don't have to deal with any of that. Switch back to the rect tool, and we're going to try and create using squares just to box out what these things would look like. So we're going to right click, create empty. So this is an empty game object. It's not anything. So it's just at 0, 0 right now. Yeah. Yeah. So from here, I'm going to go over here. We're going to move our game object into the right spot, just so it looks right. So you'll notice we have a snake right here. And I'm going to pause the video once we finish one snake and do the rest off camera. But it's expected that you do them as well. But basically, so I'm going to place it where the head of the snake would be. So we're going to start. We're going to right click, 2D objects, sprites, square. And I'm going to use the rect transform. Really thin and really small. Remember to put it on layer 1 because the board is on layer 0. So we know where the head is. I'm going to try and box out this snake. We're going to Control C, Control V to create a new one. Rotate. Thin it out. We're going to go all the way down to 60. Or forward. And then rotate again. Back. And then rotate again. And start making it smaller. Control C, Control V. Then we're just going to finish it off. Make it really small. There we go. We've created a snake. Now this could be a little longer. Yeah, that's our first snake. And you'll notice the board is really coming together, just overall. We might want to that a little. Yeah. So I'm going to pause. And for you, it'll be a second. But for me, we'll be done filling the board. All right. So I finished adding all the snakes. Notice that it's the same now. And I named all the heads head so that we can just click select the head, select right above the next head, create empty parent, and then create empty parent, Keep going until we've gotten all the snakes. Now, name this to snakes. And then each of these, so control click. Snake. Now we just minimize them. All right. So we've gone through the snakes, we've gone through the ladders. Now you're probably wondering, what are these material things that I mentioned at the beginning? Well, so you notice how these are all uncolored right now. We want them to be colored. We want them to color like this. So we are going to create folder, materials, create material. We're going to call it snake. And then we're going to go here, shader, sprites, default. I'm going to tint this one green. Rename it to snake 1. So that's our green snake. Create material 2. And we're going to keep going just like this. And I'm going to pause and have these done. All right. So I've created all of our materials. Ladder 1, 2, 3, 4. Snake 1, 2, 3, 4. And then our goals. So now we can just drag and drop these on. We want 2 green ladders, 2 yellow ladders, 1 red ladder, 1 brown ladder. Then we have our snakes. We want 2 green snakes. Another thing that you can do is, so if we select our first snake and all of its objects, and just drag this on to each piece to color it. Obviously, you don't need to have them selected. You can just. But I always find it's more fun to just drag and drop it onto the screen. Yeah. Another thing that we can do is if we go to our yellow snake, you'll see here. That was the wrong button. You'll see here that we have all of them selected. So we go to materials, select the whole thing. This is our yellow snake. We can just replace it right here. So that's a lot faster. So this is our purple snake, so we can just snake 3. And then this is our final yellow snake. Oh, wait, I selected the wrong one. There we go. And then final yellow snake. And then we can select our goal. That on there. Now we've got all the right colors. And that's everything. So what are we going to do with this board that we've just created? Well, remember how we created a prefab earlier? We're going to drag. We're going to create our board. Board should not. Oops. We're going to we're going to right-click, Prefab, unpack completely, select all of these, put them under our temp board instead. And now everything's in the right place. I had it under the wrong object this entire time. So this is the board that we want to get rid of now. So we can just delete that, save our temp board. Now if we open this up, we've got our board. Now this is a very temporary board, and we will be replacing it with sprites. But hopefully you understand the idea of creating prefabs, using them. In this case, you know, we've created a board that we can just, if we go into our sample scene now after saving, if we go into prefabs, just drag and drop our board. Now a snakes and ladders board in this scene. That's all. Yeah. Other than that, there is one thing to be sure that just in case you missed, you'll notice that the green snake is drawing on top of everything, on top of the purple snake. Reason for that is I set it to layer 3. The purple snake is drawing on top of the ladder and everything. That's because I set it to layer 2. The ladder is set to layer 1. The board is set to layer 0. And that's pretty much all you need to make sure. However, that was all taught in the last tutorial. But yeah, congratulations. Now, on to the recap.